Shattered Vows, chapter current a whirlwind beginning. When I first met him, I was walking through a gallery in the historic part of town. Of all places, that's where I thought I'd find romance, though it was the last thing on my mind. I'd taken a day off from work to relax, maybe even find some inspiration for a painting I'd been planning. I never expected to lock eyes with a stranger who would so quickly become my whole world. But there he was, handsome, with a confident stride, scanning the displays of a local artist who favoured bright abstracts and swirling acrylics. He was wearing a simple black button-down, sleeves rolled to his elbows. I'd been admiring one painting from a respectful distance when he stepped up next to me and made a comment about how the swirls reminded him of the ocean. His voice had a calming timbre, low but full of warmth. We started chatting about art, of all things, and within minutes we were laughing like old friends. That was our first conversation, so full of spark and curiosity that I forgot the rest of the gallery patrons even existed. We introduced ourselves. His name was Ayaz, an unusual name, but I liked the sound of it immediately. He said he was in the area to help out with a family business. I didn't ask for details. I was too enraptured by the easy flow of conversation that seemed to pass between us. We strolled through the entire gallery together, painting by painting, dissecting each swirl of colour as if we were the only two people on the planet who truly understood it. Afterward, he insisted on taking me to a cafe across the street for coffee. We sat at a small corner table for what felt like hours. Even the barista teased us that we must have a lot to catch up on, which was remarkable considering we had been strangers only that morning. Something about him lit me up inside, made me feel noticed and heard in a way I hadn't experienced before. He was inquisitive, always leaning in and asking follow-up questions about my background, my family, my hopes for the future. In turn, he shared bits of his life, how he'd grown up in a large family, how he recently travelled a lot for business but missed the stability of home. The hours flew by, and by the time dusk settled in, we'd wandered through half the city's old streets, continuing a conversation that never seemed to run out of steam. He walked me back to my car, gave me a gentle hug, no presumptuous kiss, and asked if we could meet again. I think I said yes before he finished the question. From that day onward, we fell into an inseparable rhythm. He called me every morning, texted me every afternoon, and we often spent evenings sharing dinner at hidden little restaurants. I introduced him to my best friend, Talia, who cast me a knowing smirk because she'd never seen me quite so enchanted before. A whirlwind romance, she teased me. Better hold on to your hat. In the space of 3 months, I came to believe he was my soulmate. It was an intoxicating closeness. We liked the same music, enjoyed quiet walks, and finished each other's sentences. I heard all sorts of remarks from the people around me. Some told me to slow down, others squealed with excitement at our fairy tale pace. But I shut out any notion that I should be careful, because in my mind, this was it. We had found each other, and I refused to let caution ruin that magic. So when he asked me to marry him 3 months after we'd met, I said yes. It was on a chilly evening under a gazebo strung with fairy lights. He got down on one knee and held out a simple ring, telling me I was the person he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. I didn't think twice. I said yes, tears of joy streaming down my cheeks. Some onlookers clapped and whistled. I remember burying my face in his coat, giggling through my tears. 3 months after that, we exchanged vows in a wedding that felt like it leaped straight out of a romance movie. We did it at a boutique venue near a lake, with soft violin music playing as I walked down the aisle in my mother's lace veil. The days soared by in a blur of blessings, tears, laughter, and toasts. I still remember how my heart pounded when we shared our first dancer. He held me close, whispered about our future together. I felt safe, adored, and giddy. Our honeymoon was in Greece. A dreamy 2 weeks of island hopping, fresh seafood, scenic sunsets, and long nights wrapped in each other's arms. I was a virgin when we married, and though that was my personal choice, I was equally nervous and excited about exploring intimacy with him. I recall the morning after our wedding night. I woke up with tears I couldn't explain, feeling simultaneously changed and unsettled. He asked me if I was all right, and I mumbled something about losing a piece of my innocence. He stroked my hair and said I was silly to think that I was radiant, and we had a lifetime to discover each other. But I also noticed a slight distance in his eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't name. It was so subtle that I convinced myself I was imagining it. Once we returned home, we moved into his parents' place temporarily. While we looked for a home of our own, they were welcoming, though sometimes overbearing, but we managed well enough. I was over the moon. Here I was, 2 years into a relationship, half a year into marriage, and everything seemed almost perfect. Except for that small voice in the back of my mind that kept asking, why did he feel so distant sometimes? But I brushed it aside, telling myself it was just the normal ebb and flow of any relationship. All this changed the day we bought our own little house. It was a modest, single-story place on the outskirts of town, with a small yard in the back. I pictured quiet weekend barbecues, maybe a dog running around, and eventually children. I used to daydream about painting a mural in one of the spare rooms, but life rarely goes as planned. Shortly after we moved in, he slipped into habits I never saw coming. Or maybe I just never wanted to see them. That was the pivot point in our marriage, and the illusions I had of us living a carefree fairy tale started to crack. Chapter 2: Seeds of Doubt. It started small. I came home from work one evening and noticed the smell of smoke in the living room. Distinctly not cigarettes. I found him in the backyard, leaning against the fence, taking a long drag from a joint. I'd known he used to smoke weed recreationally in his teens, but he'd told me he gave it up long before we married. Seeing him there sent a jolt of surprise through me. He offered me a slow grin, shrugging as if it was no big deal. "Just unwinding," he said. "It's not a big deal." But it felt big to me. I had grown up in a household where substance use was demonized, so maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should keep an open mind, I told myself. He insisted it was a one-time lapse, but soon I found him smoking again. Then again. It quickly turned into a daily thing. Like a routine he clung to as soon as the clock struck 5. He'd also indulge in other drugs occasionally. MDMA, acid, cocaine in small doses. Things I'd never even dreamed of touching before. Sometimes he coaxed me to try them with him, describing it as a bonding experience. I was curious but also deeply unsure. Still, I gave in once or twice, thinking it might help us connect. The experiences were wild and disorienting, and part of me felt rebellious. But the other part was terrified. I wondered, where is this leading us? Our daily life became overshadowed by his increasingly volatile moods. At times, he was the charming man I'd married. Funny, affectionate, telling me how lucky he was to have me. Other times he seemed distant, even cold. He'd disappear into the garage late at night, mumbling about needing alone time. I tried to get him to talk, but he would shut me down with short answers or vague reassurances that everything was fine. The trust issues began with subtle signs. I'd sometimes see scratches on his back that I didn't remember giving him, or faint red marks on his arms. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he was doing some physical activity I didn't know about. Gardening, or maybe he got scratched by something at work. I started to notice odd stains on our sheets, ones that didn't look like anything from us, or smudges on the walls that resembled shoe prints at awkward heights. When I asked about them, he always offered some half-baked explanation. I must track something in, or I was trying to fix the overhead fan. My suspicion brewed silently. I was torn between confronting him and not wanting to be the nagging wife. Besides, it all could be explained away, right? People get random marks. The tension grew, though, and I started to question everything. If he was lying about weed, what else might he be hiding? One afternoon, I discovered a small bank charge to a website I didn't recognize. Out of curiosity, I typed the URL into my laptop. It turned out to be a live video chat platform, explicit in nature. I confronted him, my heart pounding. He tried to bluff at first. "Oh, it's a gaming site." But I pressed him, my tears revealing how scared I was. Finally, he admitted he'd paid for a session with an online cam girl. My stomach twisted. I told him, this is borderline cheating, and he seemed genuinely remorseful, promised never to do it again, said he'd been feeling lonely. I swallowed my pain, trying to believe him. We were only a year and a half into marriage. We could fix this, couldn't we? But the uneasy feeling never left. A month later, I found a lipstick stain on a glass in the dishwasher. Pink, vibrant, definitely not mine. He tried to brush it off. "It might be your lipstick." I rarely wore lipstick at home, let alone pink. Suspicious, I ended up searching his car, which was something I never thought I'd do. My heart hammered as I rifled through the glove compartment and under the seats. Then I found it, a pantyhose sock with a deep pink lipstick stain shoved under the spare tire. My vision blurred with shock. My hands shook as I rummaged further, discovering condoms hidden beneath the driver's seat. We hadn't used condoms in months. Why would he need them? That night, after confronting him, I cried for hours. He spun a web of excuses. The sock was from his mother, who once owned the car. The lipstick, stained glass, might be from me or from a friend. The condoms were for a romantic, bush adventure he wanted to plan for us. Even then, I sensed he was twisting the truth. But how could I prove otherwise? I wasn't with him 24/7. Each of his explanations was flimsy yet almost plausible if I stretched my imagination. I didn't sleep much that night. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. My mind raced through scenarios. Was he meeting someone? Was he hooking up in his car? Did I make a huge mistake by marrying him so quickly? He apologized, told me he loved me, told me I was imagining things, said that I was reading too many detective stories. I wanted to believe him so badly that I forced myself to push the doubts aside, at least for a while. But the seeds of mistrust had taken root, and they were already growing unstoppable. Chapter 3, Confessions and Lies. A few months later, another incident destroyed whatever shaky progress we'd made. One Saturday, I planned to go out of town for a day trip with my cousin Elena. As I was leaving, he announced he had plans with friends that night, something he rarely did. I thought it was a good sign. Maybe it meant he was trying to be social and normal again, not just holed up in weed-induced hazes. So I encouraged him. "Go," I said, hugging him goodbye. "Have fun." I returned late that evening, but he didn't come home until around 100 a.m. He stumbled in, eyes bloodshot, face pale. He collapsed on the couch and started crying, mumbling incoherent apologies. When I pressed for an explanation, he confessed that he took a bunch of drugs. NDMA, some other pills, and ended up at a massage parlor where a woman apparently grinded on him. He claimed they didn't do the deed, but it was close. My heart hammered so violently I thought I might faint. He then started panicking, muttering about seeing bumps on his genitals. He was convinced he had herpes, rummaging through his phone for pictures. I looked, and I didn't see anything unusual. He was practically shaking in paranoia. In tears, I grabbed a bag and stuffed some clothes in, my mind whirling with heartbreak. How could he do this to me? I told him I was leaving, just like I'd warned from the beginning that if he ever cheated, I'd be out. The next day, he called me, sounding distraught, swearing he'd never actually do such a thing, that he was just hallucinating. He said the drugs made him see those bumps, and he must have conjured the entire scenario in a bad trip. He insisted he only had $100 bill with him, so he couldn't have even paid for any services. He offered me bank statements showing no suspicious charges. I found myself wavering. He certainly seemed out of it, and I knew heavy drug use could produce vivid hallucinations. My anger was overshadowed by confusion. Could he have imagined the entire episode? Against my better judgment, I let him reel me back in. He claimed he needed me. He was depressed, suicidal even. He promised to stop using so many drugs and turned on phone location sharing as a way to rebuild trust. For the next few weeks, things were calm. We watched movies on the couch like a normal couple, had quiet dinners, even spent a weekend visiting my sister in the country, but the underlying tension never truly disappeared. Every time I remembered that night, my stomach knotted. Eventually, he grew tired of me asking about it, telling me to drop the subject. He turned off his phone location, claiming it was humiliating to be tracked. Our fragile peace started to crumble again. I could see it in the way he'd stare at his phone for long moments or slip outside with it in his hand. What was he hiding this time? By October of that year, he was spiraling. He became suicidal, told me he was too unhappy, that our marriage wasn't working. He singled me out as part of the problem, as if my anxiety about his behavior was driving him into depression. I started to question my own sanity. Was I a toxic partner for not trusting him? Was I pushing him to the brink? He decided to quit weed cold turkey. We talked about how he needed a fresh start, a detox. That's when he proposed a short trip to Bali, claiming it would be a chance to reset. He showed me a few wellness retreats online, describing how they had yoga, therapy sessions, organic meals. This could be good for me, he said, eyes gleaming with hope. But the day he left, I noticed 4 condoms missing from our bedroom drawer. Another jolt of dread shot through me. He left in a hurry, hugging me briefly as I stood there, stunned. After he took off, I found the pharmacy receipt in a trash can, condoms, delay gel. What is he planning? My hands shook as I tried to piece it together. He texted me from the airport, sounding normal. But then, hours later, I discovered that he had attempted to call some woman multiple times. He also sent her a long message about wanting to commit to her. My heart dropped into my stomach. Meanwhile, he FaceTimed me smiling, telling me he was going to walk around the hotel and watch a soccer match. Confusion tore me apart. How could he do this so blatantly, yet talk to me as if everything was fine? The next morning, he called me in a panic, claiming he'd downloaded Tinder, invited a woman back to his room for 20 minutes, and might have caught herpes again. He then said he'd had 36 beers in one day, tried to drown himself in the ocean, and woke up on the shore only to be pulled out by some lady. My head spun. I oscillated between fury, heartbreak, and terror that he might truly kill himself. He vanished again for a day, ignoring my calls. Then family members called me, frantic. They said he'd told them he was suicidal, had said goodbye. Worried about his life, I contacted the hotel. The staff told me he was fine physically, but upset about a mistake he made with his wife. That was the nail in the coffin of my illusions. He was presumably hooking up with someone and labeling it a mistake. Yet my worry for him overshadowed my anger. I told his brother to go and get him, to bring him home. All I could think was, I don't want him to die. He was eventually found in a bar, weeping, calling me to come rescue him. I was back home, powerless. His brother flew over and dragged him back. The day he returned, I took him to the hospital. He was placed on a psychiatric hold for 2 weeks. During that time, I visited him daily, bringing meals, reading him uplifting articles, stroking his hair when he cried. We shared moments of vulnerability that felt raw and real. Part of me hoped this hospital stay would reset him properly, that we could fix this shattered thing we once called a marriage. Near the end of his hospitalization, I cornered him about the missing condoms. He looked me straight in the eye and said, I intended to cheat, but when it came down to it, I couldn't go through with it. In a twisted way, it felt like relief that maybe he hadn't physically gone through with intercourse. But the notion he had planned it so meticulously stabbed me in the gut. My mind replayed the memory of the pantyhose sock, the lipstick stain, the suspicious bank charges. How many times has he done this? He was discharged on antidepressants, seemingly grateful to have a second chance. For a few weeks, we tiptoed around each other, trying to rebuild something that felt irreparably broken. But as the tension of real life returned, so did the fights. Whenever I brought up trust or asked for clarity about his stories, he snapped. One afternoon, enraged, he threatened to take a second wife, mocking me for being so attached. That was the final straw in my emotional capacity. I shut down. Something in me just died. A day later, while he was out, I finally found the courage to go through his phone thoroughly. That's when I saw it, the message to that woman in Bali, the one where he told her he wanted to commit to her, how he dreamed of living with her. My blood ran cold. Nausea welled up in me. I felt like my entire existence had been a cruel joke. When he returned, I'd already packed half his belongings and placed them in the living room. He saw the expression on my face and sighed, as if he knew. I confronted him, brandishing his phone, reading the message out loud. He didn't deny it. Yes, he said. That's what happened. I asked again about the massage parlor, about his claim that he'd done the deed. He nodded. Yeah, but I couldn't perform. My eyes blurred with tears. I wasn't sure if that was the truth or just another manipulative half-lie. All I knew was that my heart had been stomped on too many times. I screamed that I was done, that I was leaving. He tried to block my way, but I sidestepped him, grabbed my purse and walked out. Outside, the sun was just setting, casting orange light across the street. In the distance, I could hear kids laughing, oblivious to my personal apocalypse. I got into my car and drove away, my eyes wet, my mind blank. My phone buzzed with calls from him, then texts. I ignored them all. That's how I ended up sitting in a guest room at my parents' house, a month later, with no contact, replaying every step that led me here. And even now, he still sends me emails claiming he never cheated, that I misunderstood. Yet I recall how he'd admitted it, how he recanted, how he changed his story over and over. My days are a whirlpool of heartbreak, confusion, and a tiny sliver of hope that maybe I can find closure, because as far as I can see, our marriage is over. Chapter 4, looking back, looking forward, sitting in my parents' guest bedroom. I can't help but pass through every memory, trying to figure out if there were signs even before the honeymoon. My parents were never wholeheartedly on board with the whirlwind courtship. My mother, especially, had reservations about me marrying a man I'd known for only 6 months. But I was too blinded by romance to heed her warnings. I keep replaying that first morning after the wedding, the way he looked at me, distant, cold. It felt like a crack in the perfect veneer. If I had asked more questions then, or insisted we talk openly about what changed overnight, Would any of this heartbreak have been prevented? I can't change the past, but it's a question that plagues me. My phone pings. I glance at it, half expecting another message from him. Instead, it's Talia, my best friend from forever. She sent a supportive text, telling me I'm strong, urging me to come stay with her for a while if I need space. I'm tempted to take her up on the offer. My parents' house is safe, but it's stifling. They're deeply traditional and see divorce as a scandal. My father is livid about what my husband did, but he's also dismayed that I might be labelled divorcee. My mother, meanwhile, insists that I go to therapy, but hopes for some magical reconciliation. She can't grasp that I'm not interested in patching things up with a cheater. I fling open my laptop and find the email from him that arrived yesterday. The subject line reads, "I'm sorry, please read." My stomach tightens. I click it out of morbid curiosity. I never cheated, I swear. You misunderstood everything I said. I was drunk and high when I wrote that message in Bali. The condom thing was a misunderstanding. The massage parlour was nothing. I only told you I cheated because I was angry your dad threatened me. I'd never do that to you. I love you. Let's talk. A numbness grips me. He's rewriting history again. He wants me to doubt my own recollection. Gaslighting, I think. That's the term. He admitted his wrongdoing multiple times, then changed the story whenever it suited him. Reading that email, I feel a wave of conflicting emotions, sadness for the love I once felt, anger at his manipulations, and a shred of pity because he's clearly not well. I respond with a single line. Stop contacting me. I need space. Then I close the laptop, pressing my palms to my eyes. I notice my hands are trembling. There's so much confusion swirling inside me. Did he physically cheat, or did he only intend to? Is the difference even relevant now? The emotional betrayal is real. The repeated lying is real. And that's enough to end any marriage, as far as I'm concerned. My father knocks on the door. "You are right, sweetheart," he calls from outside. I quickly compose myself and open the door. He peers in, concern etched on his face. "I just wanted to check on you. You haven't eaten dinner yet." "I'm not hungry," I say. My voice sounds distant to my own ears. He nods, glancing at the packed suitcases in the corner. "I told your mother maybe we should get you some fresh air. A trip somewhere could do you good." I force a smile. "That might be nice," I admit. "I need to clear my head." He reaches out and squeezes my shoulder gently. "We're here for you, no matter what you decide," he says, voice trembling with fatherly concern. "Divorce or not, you have a right to do what's best for you." I nod, heart aching. "Thanks, Dad." He walks away, leaving me alone with my whirling thoughts. In bed, I stare at the ceiling, letting the quiet hum of a distant TV lull me. My mind flickers back to my childhood dreams of a fairy tale wedding, the white dress, the handsome groom, the happily ever after. How naive, I think bitterly. Real life is messy. Some marriages are illusions from the start. Now, I'm grappling with the aftermath of a heartbreak I never imagined possible. Yet, amid the darkness, I also feel a flicker of relief. I'm out. I'm safe from the chaos he generated, from the drugs, the paranoia, the lies. Even though my heart still yearns for the man I thought he was, I know that man never truly existed. He was a construct of my romantic idealism and his manipulative charm. The reality is someone who deflects blame, spirals into self-destructive patterns, and drags me down with him. Before I drift off to a fitful sleep, I vow to seek professional help. My mother's suggestion of therapy stung my pride at first, but it's probably the best thing I can do right now. I want to rediscover who I am, separate from all this betrayal. Because somewhere along the line, I lost pieces of myself too. Chapter Factory, therapy and triggers the next week. I find myself sitting in a softly lit counsellor's office. The walls are painted a soothing pale green, and a salt lamp glows in the corner. A box of tissues rests on a side table, presumably for tears. My therapist, Dr. Merrick, is a kind-eyed woman in her 40s who exudes calm. She asks me to recount my story from the moment I met my husband to the day I walked out. It takes me nearly an hour to tell it all. Sometimes my voice cracks, sometimes I laugh bitterly at the absurdities. She listens intently, scribbling notes occasionally, nodding in empathy. When I'm finished, I feel both drained and oddly lighter, like I finally put words to the pain that's been simmering inside me. "Tell me," she says gently, "why do you think you stayed so long after seeing so many red flags?" I stare at the carpet, trying to articulate what's been tangling in my mind. I guess I loved him," I say. "Or at least, I loved the idea of him. And he always had some explanation, some sorry look in his eyes that made me hope it was a mistake or a misunderstanding." She nods. "That's common in traumatic relationships. We cling to the potential of the person, not their reality." She leans forward. "How do you feel about your future now, with the possibility of divorce looming?" My chest tightens. "Scared," I admit. I'm not even sure how to start over. I also feel guilty, like I failed. My parents had a stable marriage for decades. I always pictured something like that for myself, but now I'm going to be the one who couldn't keep it together. Divorce doesn't mean you failed. Dr. Merrick says softly, "It can mean you refuse to remain in a harmful situation, which is an act of strength. But it takes time to recognize that. We'll work on helping you heal, piece by piece." Those words loosen some tension in me. We shift into a gentle conversation about self-care steps. Journaling, daily affirmations, leaning on supportive friends. It's not going to be an overnight fix, but it's a start. She also suggests I consider some legal advice, especially given the complexity of the situation: cheating, substance abuse, mental health concerns. For the next few weeks, I see Dr. Merrick twice a week, each session a slow unraveling of my confused emotions. I start writing in a private journal, sometimes ranting with anger, other times weeping onto the pages about how betrayed I feel. Each day, I aim to do one small act of self-kindness, whether it's taking a long bath, going for a walk, or painting again. Slowly it helps, yet triggers lurk everywhere. A random ad for a couple's resort on TV makes my stomach clench. The mention of Bolly in conversation triggers flashbacks of that phone call when he admitted to inviting a stranger to his hotel room. I avoid certain music that reminds me of our honeymoon. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I bolt awake, convinced he's sneaking around the house. Then I remember, I'm at my parents' place safe and he's not here. The relief is bittersweet. My best friend Talia drops by often. One evening, we share a bottle of wine in the backyard. The cicadas hum in the warm summer air. "You know," she says softly, swirling her glass, "it's okay to be angry. You don't always have to be the understanding one." I exhale. I guess I'm so used to making excuses for him. He had a bad childhood, he was depressed, he was on drugs, but that doesn't give him the right to lie and cheat. "Exactly," Talia agrees, placing a comforting hand on mine. "He's an adult. He made those choices. And you're the one picking up the pieces." Her validation brings tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I whisper, my voice choked with emotion. I still have moments when I think, what if he's telling the truth now? Then I remind myself how many times he's changed his story. Talia's brow furrows. "Sweetie, you deserve better than constant second guessing. If a relationship is built on real love and respect, it shouldn't make you feel this unsafe." She clinks her glass against mine gently. 2 new beginnings, whenever you're ready. I murmur the toast back, letting the wine's warmth spread through me. In that moment, I realize how grateful I am for Talia, for Merrick, for my parents. Even with their old-fashioned views, they still open their home to me. I'm not alone. That's a start. Chapter 6. Echoes of the past, despite my resolve to move forward. I find myself grappling with repeated nightmares. Often, they revolve around the same theme. I'm standing on a beach in Bali, watching him swim farther and farther out into the ocean. I scream for him to come back, but he waves me off with a grin, then disappears beneath the waves. I wade in searching for him, only to find a pair of lipstick-stained pantyhose tangled in seaweed. I jolt awake, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering. One morning, after a particularly bad dream, I decide to revisit old photos. My logic is that perhaps confronting the memories head-on might reduce their power. I open my laptop and scroll through the wedding album. Images of me beaming in white lace, him in a tailored suit, exchanging vows under floral arches. I reach our honeymoon folder. Pictures of us exploring Greek islands, sipping wine at sunset, laughing as we fed each other bites of baklava. My heart feels heavy, like lead. When exactly did he start lying? I wonder. Or was he lying all along? I move on to random day. In the life photos from our early months of marriage. Us painting the walls in our first house, me covered in flecks of pastel green paint. Him giving a playful wink to the camera. There's a shot of him hugging me from behind, making a goofy face. I linger on that photo. Was this real love, or was I just too blind to notice the cracks forming? A wave of sadness hits me. My chest feels tight. I shut the laptop, deciding this was not the catharsis I hoped for. Maybe time, not forced revisiting, is what I need. My phone buzzes at that moment. A number I don't recognize. I consider ignoring it, but curiosity wins out. "Hello," I answer cautiously. His voice. I nearly drop the phone. "Why are you calling me from a different number?" I ask, swallowing the lump in my throat. He sighs. "You blocked me. I wanted to see if you're okay." Anger flares. "I told you not to contact me." I snap. "Use email if it's something urgent." But his tone wavers. I miss you. I'm miserable. Can we talk about this? Maybe see a counselor?" A short, bitter laugh escapes me. "I'm already seeing one, for the damage you caused. And I'm done talking Ayaz. You keep changing your story. How am I supposed to believe anything you say anymore?" He falls silent. After a few moments, he murmurs, "I understand you're hurt." I cut him off. "No, don't do that. Don't feed me lines about how you never cheated. You admitted it. You bragged about it. Then you retracted it. I can't keep playing this game." His voice trembles. "I'm not playing games. I'm messed up. I'm depressed. I was always messed up. You knew that. You said you'd stand by me." Your tears spring to my eyes. "I stood by you through your suicidal episodes, your drug binges, your hospital stay. I forgave so many things. But I can't forgive repeated betrayal. That's not me walking away from mental illness. That's me refusing to be lied to anymore." He sniffles, a choked sound. "You're right. I'm sorry." For a split second, I hear genuine remorse. Then he continues, "But if you'd just give me one more chance, I swear I can." I end the call, heart pounding. My body shakes with adrenaline, tears sliding down my cheeks. I hate feeling so torn, so simultaneously guilty and angry, but I know picking up again where we left off would be a disaster. Dr. Merrick calls it a toxic cycle. The sweet apologies, the momentary hope, followed by another wave of deception. I try to calm my breathing. I have to be strong, I remind myself. He's not my responsibility anymore. I have to protect myself. Letting him back in would be like willingly stepping into quicksand. My mother knocks, peeking in. "Everything all right?" I heard raised voices. I force a reassuring nod. "Just Ayaz," he called. My mother's face falls. She steps in, crossing the room to hug me. I rest my head on her shoulder, letting the tears come. She rubs my back, whispering, "I'm so sorry, baby. We'll get through this." For the first time, I feel a wave of gratitude for my mother's unconditional love. Yes, she's traditional, but she's also a mother who sees her child in pain. I cling to her warmth, reminded even when illusions shatter, real love still exists in the arms of family. Chapter 73: Hidden Anger, Hidden Grief. Over the next few sessions, Dr. Merrick urges me to explore my anger, a feeling I've historically suppressed. I realize I have a deep well of it, mixed with grief. It's anger at him for lying, for humiliating me, for risking my health with potential affairs. Anger at myself for ignoring so many red flags. Anger at the universe for giving me this whirlwind romance only to snatch it away in the cruelest manner. I join a small support group for individuals going through divorce or separation. We meet in a modest community centre, forming a circle of mismatched chairs. There are about 8 of us, each with a story of heartbreak or betrayal. A woman named Harriet shares how her husband left after 30 years for a younger woman. A man named Miguel reveals how he discovered his wife had a second family in another state. Our tales vary, but the underlying betrayal is a unifying thread. I find solidarity in these meetings, a sense that I'm not the only one grappling with confusion. People share coping strategies: journaling, painting, volunteering. Harriet started a small garden. It helped her process her anger by nurturing new life. The group's honesty is raw but comforting. We cry, we laugh, we exchange phone numbers. Whenever someone has a meltdown day, they can text the group for moral support. Outside of therapy and group, I try to rebuild a routine. I pick up extra freelance work online to keep myself busy, to earn some money. I start painting again. Small landscapes at first, then bigger abstract pieces that reflect my tumultuous emotions. Sometimes the brushstrokes turn violent, swirling with dark reds and blacks, capturing my nightmares. Painting becomes a release, a way to express the unspoken anguish and fury. One afternoon, Talia drags me to a yoga class. She insists it'll help calm my mind. We roll out our mats in a warm, light-filled studio. My arms shake in downward dog, my hamstrings protest in warrior pose, but the breathing exercises do help. By the time we finish, I'm drenched in sweat, but oddly serene. Talia smiles, hooking her arm in mine. "See, you're stronger than you think." That night, I crawl into bed feeling a rare sense of peace. I fall asleep quickly, but at around 2:00 a.m. I jolt awake from a dream. My heart hammers. This time, the dream is of me confronting him in that Bali hotel room. A surreal scene where the walls are covered with photos of pantyhose and lipstick, stained glasses. He stands in the corner, expressionless, repeating, "I'm sorry," while a faceless woman stands behind him, holding a condom. The dream leaves me gasping for air, my cheeks wet with tears. I scribble in my journal, desperate to ground myself. He's not here. I'm safe. The emotions swirl, and I wonder if I'll ever truly escape the shadow of his betrayal. Yet the more I pour onto the page, the more I feel a simmering determination that I won't let these nightmares define me. Chapter 8: Legal Paths and Moral Dilemmas. A month into therapy. Dr. Merrick urges me to consult a lawyer about my options. Even if you're uncertain about divorce, she says gently, it's good to know your rights and the steps involved. Empowering yourself with knowledge can alleviate some anxiety. So I find myself in a small law office, greeted by a no-nonsense attorney named Ms. Wheeler. She's in her 50s, with short grey hair and sharp eyes. After I explain the broad strokes of my situation, Quick marriage, possible infidelity, drug use, mental health crisis. She nods sympathetically. Have you considered an annulment? She asks. I blink. The idea hadn't crossed my mind. She explains that an annulment might be possible if certain conditions are met. Fraud, for instance, or if the marriage was never consummated under certain technical definitions. But we did consummate it, so that might not apply. Another angle is if he missold me about significant aspects of himself from the start. But I'm not sure how strong a case that is. We also discuss straightforward divorce. Ms. Wheeler outlines the process, filing a petition, arranging for equitable distribution of assets, potential spousal support if relevant. My head spins. I never imagined I'd be here, sifting through legal jargon about dissolving a marriage that's only 2 years old. At the end of our meeting, she hands me a folder of documents. Review these. Consider your next steps carefully. If you want to proceed, call me. She pauses, her tone softening. I'm sorry you're going through this. It's never easy, especially when there's emotional turmoil. Thank you. I murmur, clutching the folder as if it's a lifeline. Walking out of that office, I feel a mixture of relief. I'm actually doing something, and sorrow at how final this might be. That night, I gather my parents around the dining table. My mother sets out tea, while my father sits with a grave expression. I explain the conversation with the lawyer. My father nods slowly, glancing between me and my mother. You have our support if you want to end this, he says firmly, though his voice trembles with emotion. I know we worried about your choice from the start, but we never wanted this heartbreak for you. My mother fidgets with her teacup. Maybe you two could still talk. He's in therapy too, right? She looks up, eyes brimming with motherly hope. I exhale, holding her gaze. Mum, he's manipulated me so many times. He changes his story about cheating every other day. I can't trust him, and a marriage without trust is pointless. She nods tearfully. I know you're right. It's just that I hate to see you hurt. I wanted so badly for you to have your fairy tale. Tears fill my own eyes. Men too, I whisper. But that fairy tale was never real. I have to accept that. We lapse into a sorrowful silence. My father reaches out, placing a comforting hand over mine. As painful as it is, having my parents' hesitant blessing to move on gives me courage. I go to bed that night thinking about calling Ms. Wheeler in the morning. The idea feels heavy in my gut, like stepping off a cliff into the unknown. But maybe it's the only path to genuine freedom. Chapter 9, Confrontations and Crossroads. Before I can finalize my decision, there's a knock on the front door of my parents' house one bright Sunday afternoon. My father opens it, only to find my husband standing there, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I'm in the kitchen, and I overhear them arguing. My heart races. What is he doing here? I hurry to the hallway. He spots me, tears in his eyes. I need to talk to you, he pleads. Please, just 10 minutes. My father scowls, stepping protectively between us. You have a lot of nerve coming here, he growls. My daughter told you to stay away. I place a shaky hand on my father's arm. It's okay, Dad. I'll hear him out. Something in me wants closure or some final statement. My father reluctantly steps aside, but remains within earshot. My mother hovers at the top of the stairs, distressed. I lead him onto the front porch. We sit on a bench, the early afternoon sun beating down. He looks thinner, more haunted than before. His eyes flit nervously. I've been clean for 3 weeks, he says, voice hoarse. No drugs, no weed. I'm serious this time. My parents kicked me out, so I've been staying with a friend. I needed to see you. My pulse pounds. Okay, I say, quietly. You're clean. Good for you. I can't help the sarcasm creeping into my tone. Is that all? He swallows. I wrote everything down. He opens a worn notebook. Inside, I can see scrawled pages, as if he's been journaling. I wanted to be honest. For once, I cheated emotionally. I was physically close to cheating. I used cam sites. Everything I told you, all the confessions, I want to own up to them. I know I tried to take them back, but I was just scared. And I'm so sorry. A wave of shock passes through me. He's never laid it out so directly. My eyes dart to the pages. So you admit you lied to me multiple times? I ask, voice trembling. He nods, tears welling. Wes, I panicked whenever you confronted me. I wanted to cover up because I was ashamed. There's no excuse. I hurt you. Ike. He breaks off, drawing a shaky breath. I'm in therapy now. Real therapy, not just the hospital stay. My therapist says I have a compulsive lying issue, among other things. We sit in silence for a moment. My heart feels battered. And what do you want from me? I finally whisper. Forgiveness, another chance. He looks down at his trembling hands. I want you to be happy, whether that's with me or not. He meets my gaze. I'd love another chance, but I don't expect it. I just wanted to come clean, to let you know I'm not playing games anymore. I do love you. In my own broken way. I close my eyes, fighting tears. My mind flashes with images of pantyhose in the trunk, suspicious bank charges, him in Bali with condoms. I recall the nightmares, the heartbreak. This doesn't erase the damage you've done. I say softly. You realize that, right? He nods miserably. I know. If there's any glimmer of hope, I'll do anything. I'll give you access to all my accounts. Do a polygraph. Anything. I stare out at the street, watching a couple of kids riding bikes down the sidewalk. Maybe you're genuinely trying now. I murmur, but I'm done living in a roller coaster. I deserve stability and honesty from day one, not day 700. Tears slip down my cheeks. I expected to be furious, but all I feel is profound sadness. He reaches out to wipe a tear from my face, and I let him just for a moment. Then I gently push his hand away. I've talked to a lawyer, I say quietly. I'm leaning toward divorce. He closes his eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. I understand, he whispers. I won't fight you. But if you ever change your mind, if you want to see how I'm doing, I'll be around. I'm not going anywhere. He stands up, shoulders slumped. Without another word, he turns and walks down the front steps. I remain on the porch bench, numb tears still sliding down my face. My father peeks out the doorway, eyebrows knitted in concern. Everything all right? I nod, though a sob racks my chest. He's gone, I manage to say. My father steps onto the porch, wrapping me in a firm hug. I bury my face in his shoulder, letting out a broken cry. Chapter 10. Choosing myself in the days following that porch confrontation, I wrestle with indecision. A tiny part of me wonders if maybe, just maybe, his tearful apology was genuine, that he's on a path to change. But a louder voice reminds me of Dr. Merrick's words, real change takes time and consistent effort. Genuine remorse isn't proven in a single conversation, but through actions over months or years. I consider the possibility of legal separation, a period to see if he can maintain sobriety and honesty. But every time I weigh that option, a new wave of exhaustion washes over me. Do I really have the energy to re-enter that chaos, monitor him like a detective, wonder if he's hooking up with strangers? One afternoon, while taking a walk along the riverbank, I close my eyes and ask myself, what do you truly want? The answer resonates in my gut. I want peace. I want the freedom to rebuild my life without fear. That evening, I call Ms. Wheeler. I'd like to file for divorce. I say, voice steadier than I expected. She confirms the next steps, schedules an appointment. I hang up, feeling a wave of somber relief. This is it, the beginning of the end. I share my decision with my parents. My mother tears up but musters a supportive nod. "We'll stand by you," she says, "no matter what the community or anyone else thinks." In therapy, Dr. Merrick congratulates me on making a choice, reminding me that closure doesn't come instantly. I might grieve the marriage for a long time, especially the version of him I fell in love with, but from grief can come new growth. I move forward with the paperwork. Ms. Wheeler files everything. I brace myself for his reaction. He sends me a short email acknowledging receipt of the documents, saying he won't contest it. He says he's sorry, once more. He says he'll respect my wishes and give me space. There's no dramatic blow-up this time, no frantic pleas or manipulations. It's oddly anticlimactic, but also merciful. Maybe he finally grasps how much he's lost. Or maybe he's just exhausted too. Either way, I step into the next chapter alone. As the legal wheels turn, I focus on me. I move out of my parents' house into a small rented studio, wanting to stand on my own 2 feet. It's a cozy space with big windows. I decorate it with my paintings, brightening the walls with color. The first night alone feels both lonely and liberating. I can hear the hum of city traffic outside. I light a scented candle, fix myself a cup of tea, and open a blank canvas. For the first time in ages, I paint not with anger, but with cautious hope. Swirls of blues and purples, a dawn over dark waters, signifying new beginnings. Halfway through, I pause and smile to myself. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be divorced at this point, I'd have laughed in disbelief. But life is unpredictable. I continue with therapy, keep attending the support group. Gradually, my nightmares reduce. The black hole in my chest shrinks day by day. I begin flirting with the idea of traveling, maybe volunteering abroad for a while. There's a sense of possibility in the air. One morning, a letter arrives from Ms. Wheeler's officer, the final divorce decree. I hold it in trembling hands. 2 short years of marriage, now dissolved in official text. My emotions swirl. Sorrow, relief, a pang of nostalgia, and a quiet sense of closure. I allow myself a day to mourn, to cry, to let out the final wave of heartbreak. Then, with a deep breath, I put the letter in a drawer, close it gently, and step forward. Epilogue, a future of my own. Months pass. I find a decent job at a local arts organization, helping run community classes. I rent a slightly bigger apartment, one with a spare room that I transform into a mini studio. My father helps me move my canvases and paint supplies. My mother visits, praising my independence. Talia invites me on weekend getaways, ensuring I never feel isolated. Occasionally, I hear tidbits about my ex-husband through mutual acquaintances. He's allegedly still in therapy, living in a small apartment downtown, trying to stay clean. I hope he truly changes for his own sake, but I don't dwell on it. My heart has no space left for that tangled web. Sometimes people ask if I'll ever date again. The truth is, I'm not in a rush. I'm learning how to be comfortable in my own company, how to trust my instincts, and find happiness that doesn't hinge on someone else's approval or presence. If love comes again, I'll approach it with wiser eyes. But for now, I savor the peace of a life free from daily suspicion and heartbreak. One late summer evening, I find myself strolling along the same gallery district where I first met him. The sun is setting, and the light is golden. I pause outside a gallery that's featuring a new exhibit. My reflection in the glass is superimposed over colourful abstracts inside. I see a woman who's older, maybe a bit jaded, but stronger. I step inside, letting the swirl of art envelop me. No immediate destiny awaits in these paintings. No illusions, just the quiet enjoyment of colour and expression. I realize, in that moment, that I've come full circle. I was once a woman searching for romance in a swirl of acrylics and conversation. Now I stand here alone, content to appreciate the art without needing it to be the backdrop for a whirlwind love story. The emptiness I felt before has been replaced by a sense of self. I can smile again, truly, without reservation. A small tear rolls down my cheek, not from sadness, but from release. I whisper a soft goodbye to the memory of him, of us, of the fairy tale that never was. Then I walk forward toward the next gallery piece. Because life goes on, and so do I.